Attributes. HTML elements can have different attributes. Each attribute is made up of a name and a value, written as name equals value between quotations. Some attributes are optional, but others are required. In the examples below, the first two attributes are optional and the last two are required. So cell spacing is an optional attribute for the table element, ID is an optional attribute for the div element, source and alt are required attributes for the image element. Now, does that mean that the image will not load if we forgot to mention or include the alt attribute? No, it will. That's because browsers are forgiving. But just so you know the right way of writing syntax, the alt and the source are required attributes of the image element. Again, the attribute is written as name equals value between quotation marks. What comes in blue are the opening tags, the ones in orange are the closing tags. And remember that the image element is a self-closing element or an empty element, which means it doesn't have a closing tag. Examples of common attributes to all elements. ID, class, and style are common attributes to all elements. ID is represented by a # in CSS, and we assign an ID to a single element on a page. Class is represented by a dot in CSS, and we assign a class to one or more elements. And we won't be using the style attribute too much because it's used for inline styling such as newsletters and so forth, which we won't cover in this class. Examples of specific attributes to specific elements. The href is a specific attribute to the A element, the source and the alt to the image element, cell padding, cell spacing are specific to the table element, col span, row span are specific to the TD element. TD stands for table data cell. We'll discuss this in the next slides. Let's look at the index of attributes in the W3C website. I have it open already. Again, it's that long page of definitions, and you can read what each attribute means, what access key is, class, and so forth. It says class, a name of a classification or list of names of classifications to which the element belongs, which means a class value can be, one element can have several classes, and there would be a space in between. So it says set of space separated tokens. Let's see where ID is. ID, a unique identifier for the element. There must not be multiple elements in a document that have the same ID value. That's why the value of an ID is unique on an HTML document, and so forth. All of this we will cover as we practice, and it will start making more sense. Let's look at this example. The table element. This is how, for example, a syntax of a table is written. This is the opening tag of the table element, and at the bottom is the closing tag. It contains 3 rows. TR stands for table row. So this is one row. So imagine the row as a horizontal row. One row, another row, and a third row. And each row has cells. So the first row has THs. TH stands for table header cell. And then the second row has TDs, table data cell. And the third row has also TDs. So if we want to see this visually, this is how it looks. So we have a table. It's made up of 3 rows. The first row has THs. The second and third rows have TDs. The difference between TH and TD is that the TH comes in bold because it's a table header cell, so by default it comes in bold, as opposed to TDs, which is a regular typeface. And then the second table is basically what would replace these TDs and THs. So if we have title 1, title 2, title 3 instead of TH, hello, bonjour, marhaba, English, French, Arabic, and so forth. So what you see on the right side is basically the visualization of the syntax that's on the left side. So this is the beginning of writing syntax and seeing how it looks on a browser. Again, talking about the table element, cell spacing and cell padding. What does this stand for? And what is row span? What is col span? Let's look at the result. Cell spacing and cell padding are HTML specific attributes of the table element, while row span and col span are HTML specific attributes of the TD element. We mentioned them in HTML, not in CSS. So in this case, when we say cell spacing is the space between cells. So if title 2 and title 1 are cells, the space between the cells and the space here at the top, on the left, at the bottom, this is cell spacing. And the value 5 is giving this visual result. If you want more distance, more space between the cells, you just put a higher value. Cell padding is how much space there is within the cell, so the space around the word title 1, around the word title 2. Again, if you want more space, you just put a higher value instead of 5. Row span is how many rows a cell is spanning. So in this case, the third cell in the second row, this is the first row, this is the second row, this is the first cell, the second cell, the third cell. The third cell in the second row is spanning 2 rows, that's why we have the value 2 here. In the third row, we have a col span 2, which means that in the third row, the cell, the first cell, is spanning 2 columns. This is one column and this is another column. So the cell is spanning or including 2 columns. So just so we know what cell spacing, cell padding, row span, and col span do. Let's look at this example just to have a clearer idea of what nested elements are. We have a div whose ID is body content. It opens at the very top and closes at the bottom. I'm talking about the gray div. It nests another div in black whose ID is container. That black div nests or is the parent of a P whose ID is first paragraph. The gray div has another child. So remember, the first child of the gray div is the black div. The second child of the gray div is the P in blue. Now let's see how deep these children are. This P, the green P, is second level deep, which means this green P is the grandchild of the gray div. It is the child of the black div. We know that by looking at where each element closes. So the black div closes after the green P, which means the P is the child of the black div. In turn, the black div is inside the gray div. That's because the gray div closes after the black div. Therefore, the black div is the child of the gray div. So grandfather, father, and child, second level deep. While this P, even though it is at the bottom of this HTML document, still it is first level deep because this blue P is the brother, if you will, or the sibling or the sister of this black div. The blue P and the black div are both the children of the gray div, even though the P happens to be lower on the page. Still, it is first level deep.